We're good to go? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the meeting to order. I think we've got full attendance with the exception of Bobby Wood with the Real Estate Commission. So I think one of the first things under the new business we'd like to go over, and we've kind of talked about it so far, is maybe to come to a consensus on the next meeting date.
We don't need to take a roll call at all.
Do we need to take a roll call, Dustin?
No.
Okay. We've discussed intermittently here November the 26th, which is a Monday after Thanksgiving, for possibly our fourth meeting as required. We're got to have 4 meetings, so that should be the fourth one to try to get it in.
I make a motion we make that our fourth meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. One down. Pretty quickly, too. Any other new business? Obviously, we need to probably dive right in. I know some have had some of the things online that people have looked at, and apparently I think everybody's got your iPads out in front.
Are we reviewing the red line documents?
I would say that's where we're at.
Okay, may I interrupt
Sure.
for a second? Mr. Chairman, I reviewed some of the submitted red lines and suggestions and would like to offer another version, and I have some hard copies here that I'd like to get passed out if we have somebody that can do that. I'd like to pass this around to everybody. I'm going to distribute these. Just send them left and right if you don't mind. Everybody take one down. Yeah. Just. You got an extra one? I'd like you to follow along, and you'll see. First of all, I want to thank Ressa for doing all the work that she did on the write-up that she submitted that everybody was able to download, and I appreciate her making that. And I've taken that and made a few changes to it, but and rather than trying to redline the document, I'd like to kind of present maybe a new way of looking at this, and I think it'll address some of the primary issues that we've talked about. First of all, being the ease of entry into the auction profession, addressing the online auction activities, and then bringing the TCA 6219 up to date with current industry practices, and the selling of certain vehicles using the auction method. We've got the car dealers here that will have a voice on that, using the auction method of marketing. On the ease of entry, I think it can best be achieved. I didn't get a copy of that I've sent around to everybody, if I would. My book, but I would like to have one of my too. But on the ease of entry, they think it can best be achieved by combining and making access to education easier. As you know, a lot of online auctions, there's a lot of online education versus just classroom education, and that's changed the industry a lot. And at the same time, we need to consider the importance and the value of reciprocal license process in the auction industry as a whole, and transition from a local avocation to a national or global profession. And basically, I came up with a Class C, a Class B, and a Class A, so that C would be like a caller of bids, B would be a business track or in place of the gallery or firm license that we talked about, and Class A license would be a public automobile auction track. So it basically allows us to open up the industry to a lot of guys that only want to be bid callers, those that actually want to run a business, and those that actually want to get into the public automobile auction license. We'll start with the Class C, the caller of bids track. This basically would be for contract auctioneers whose only interest is being a for-hire bid caller for auction companies or auto auctions, livestock markets, or in the auction business. And we'd have a different education track for them, and that would be a basic core education program of 16 hours in the classroom, and this would be for covering the Tennessee auction law, contracts, the Uniform Commercial Code, ethics, professionalism, and personal insurance and finance. and then the bid calling instruction would be entirely optional, although a lot of these guys go to auction school, as Russell will attest to, only to learn how to call bids. And that's where they enjoy doing it, and that's what they go to do, and they would get that. Out-of-state auctioneers would be eligible for this license with a reciprocal auctioneer's license from any other state and proof of the basic core education from an approved provider. There would be no continuing education required for a Class C auction license. There would be some restrictions from that license. They would not be able to negotiate or enter an auction contract or sell real property or personal property. They would not be able to take possession of seller assets or take possession of the auction proceeds. And they would put themselves out as being available to conduct an auction only. They would be a caller of bids only. And they would act as a bid caller only for properly licensed auction businesses. So they would have to call bids for a Class B auctioneer that would hold a business license, or a Class A auctioneer would hold an public auto auction license. And of course, they'd abide by the other auction laws in the state of Tennessee. The Class B would be a business track, and that would be what we would call auctioneers today. Most of them are business track auctioneers, and they would allow for a higher level of entry into the profession. You'd have more education. You'd have mandatory auction and business educational program available in the classroom or online. They would combine the current 80-hour program and the 30-hour programs without bid calling instruction into a 50-hour program that includes 16 hours of basic core plus 34 hours including asset-specific instruction, whether it be automobiles, real estate, antiques, equipment, etc. The auction processes, getting into writing contracts, negotiating the auction setup, clerking, cashiering, all the things that we do, auction settlement, closing, advertising, promotion, technology and auctioneering, live auctions, auction math, escrow accounting, which is important, sales tax, which is important, business basics, bankruptcy, estates, personal property, and appraisals. There would be testing, and we use basically the current testing process that we have now. We talked about this before, about changing the apprenticeship from an apprentice program to an affiliate auctioneer provision, and that will be experience-based with the participation in a certain number of auctions and auction-related activities. You would have continuing education. And the other thing is we'd reduce that apprenticeship time from 1 year, from 2 years to 1 year, which we've talked about in trying to make it a little bit easier. And there would be continuing education. Now, this reciprocity for the Class B auctioneer, or the business track, would meet the reciprocity requirements in other states as long as the name included auctioneer and included at least 30 hours of bid calling instruction to meet the educational requirements for reciprocity. Out-of-state auctioneers will be available to get this license if we have a reciprocal agreement with that state, and you have the proof of the basic core education. So this is kind of, you've talked about the Class C, which is a caller of bids, the Class B, and the Class B also would have restrictions on it. They would only be used properly licensed individuals to call bids at a live auction or simulcast, and they'd be identified as the auctioneer, responsible person who is responsible to the TAC for all legal compliance, contract, escrow, and the conduct of all employees, contractors, or bid callers. So for the Class B guy, we are looking to that guy to be responsible for all activities within that firm. He would be responsible for all his affiliate auctioneers, for any bid callers that he hires, and for all accounting and escrow problems that he would ever have. And this would be equivalent to an auctioneer-owned firm license, and we're going to be getting rid of the auction firm and the gallery license. That would go away, and this would be equivalent to, they do live auctions on site, online, and simulcast auctions. Whether they do a gallery or a fixed location, doesn't matter. They'd be able to do that. And all the non-licensed employees can work under their responsible person as their agent, provided the responsible person, auctioneer, accepts full responsibility for all legal compliance and conduct of non-licensed employees. And the non-licensed employees may solicit auction sales but the responsible party must be the one to sign that contract. And we've had a lot of discussion about, where you have to have an auctioneer always involved in gaining auction business, and this will allow for the responsible party to hire salespeople that would not be auctioneers, but he would be responsible for those and was responsible for signing those. The Class A auctioneer would be an automobile auctioneer, and it would require even a higher level of entry above the Class B. And this person would have a level of trust and responsibility granted to those license holders who are selling consigned motor vehicles from public to public. This would be in place of the public automobile auctioneer's license, but it would be a Class A. The education would be a mandatory 50-hour education program required for the auction, plus an additional 15 hours of classroom covering the Tennessee motor vehicle law, motor vehicle titles, insurance and liability, the auction processes, sales tax, and escrow. So that would be a Class A. The restrictions on that we were proposing is that they would have to hold a valid auction business license with identified responsible person, must meet the current license requirement related to their location, bonds, motor vehicle dealer license, its signage, etc., and only use licensed bid callers to sell from the block. The exemptions that we've talked about is if you're doing a bona fide business liquidation where you have vehicles inside of that business liquidation, a fleet reduction with notification of the VIN number to the Motor Vehicle Commission, selling repossessed vehicles, or selling vehicles in an estate. Now, I think the current law is 5 vehicles in an estate per year. There can be some discussion on whether we want to leave it at that level or not, but I think the guys in motor vehicle would like to see us be limited on that, and I'm sure Bob will have something to say about that. Online auctions, we would have also define the time listings for the purposes of the exemption. As time listing means any offering good for sale with a fixed ending time and a date which does not exceed based on bidding activity. So long as it has a fixed time and it doesn't extend for any reason, it would still be exempt under that portion. Online auctions of automobiles by companies primarily engaged in the auction industry holding a motor vehicle license. The other suggestions that we came up with is getting away from the recovery fund to having a $20,000 surety bond. The recovery fund is cumbersome and it's hard for people to ever gain access to that. They have to exhaust quite a few legal challenges in order to be able to even access the recovery fund. And we would switch to a $20,000 surety bond, which would give a little bit easier access for a specific responsible party. We'd remove the requirement for a firm number to be on auction-related advertisement, require the name of the business, the name of the person responsible, and a telephone number. Again, we're looking for an individual to be responsible on every one of these auctions. And we would remove the gallery license and that all education could be conducted online. That's sort of a summary of what, if we want to make a recommendation as to accomplishing our goals, and I offer that as a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Should we?
That's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in, and that's what I was thinking. Maybe we need to segregate it and take one part of it at a time and just kind of go through and see what kind of discussion we might have. Yes, sir.
The additional suggestions, is that for all?
Primarily, it'd be for your A and B auction. The Class C, excuse me, the Class C probably would not have to have that surety bond.
Can I address that, because that was also one of the suggestions that I had in my markup, and my initial intent on that was that it did not include. I mean, so Commissioner Morris may challenge that, but that 20,000 did not include the motor vehicles because under the current public auto auction law, there are two bonds, a $50,000 bond to the auction commission and a $50,000 bond to the motor vehicle commission. And my intent was for that to stay in place exactly like it is currently. This would address replacing the recovery fund, which is in current 6219, right, that allows two $10,000 claims against any one auctioneer, and it would just replace that potential of 20,000 with a bond. Okay.
Thank you,
Is
Russell.
that all right with you?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Mr. Connor?
One quick question on the bottom of the page on the public automobile auction track. You talk about defining timed listings. Is that relative to online automobile auctions, or is that relative to?
All, I assume.
Any online auction.
So, Commissioner Morris, that would apply to anyone in the business track as well. Okay.
I want to go back to reciprocity for the licensed bid caller. If he has that kind of a license, how does that affect their reciprocity in other states? Are they now are much more limited license? Are they going to be recognized, or do we know what the effect of that's going to be?
I wouldn't think that we'd know how that would be affected. I think they would have to look at every state where they want to be a bid caller and what ease of entry they have in those other states. Tennessee is obviously known as one of the hardest states, in the union to get an auction license in, and I think they might have an easier process by using this and using that license to get a reciprocal license in other states.
Did I also address? Okay. Some states have very minimal licensing requirements. Other states have significant licensing requirements. So, for example, if a Tennessee bid caller wanted to seek a license in, then that basic core education would more than likely be sufficient for the state of New Hampshire. But if they wanted to seek a reciprocal license in North Carolina, they would have to go through that whole business track, do the bid calling, get the 80 hours, because that 80-hour criteria for, I guess, probably 5 or 6 states is critical for reciprocity. Other states, such as Alabama or Louisiana, will allow for an apprentice of education, but those states that mandate education, the minimum is 80 hours. So that 50-hour curriculum plus the 30-hour bid calling would make them eligible. So if someone wanted to be a bid caller in the state of Tennessee and work for David Allen, they don't have to go through that whole process. But if they want to be a bid caller in Tennessee and North Carolina and travel circuits, then it's a staggered entry level based on the amount of responsibility and
the onus would be on the bid caller to determine how viable how big a job, what he wanted to do. Which
they choose their career path.
They choose their career path. Mm-hmm. And then I have a lot of other questions, but related to one that just stuck out. If I'm a licensed bid caller, I can be for hire for only personal property and automobiles. What about real estate?
I don't think we have the jurisdiction to make that call. I think from the real estate commission, because our task force, I don't think can do anything about the real estate law. I think my personal opinion right now, Jeff, I don't know where you're at on this, but you would still have to be a licensed real estate agent to call bids at a real estate auction.
Okay, that's correct.
You have to be a licensed real estate agent to even ring for
They can
bids
be
at a
a-
real
right.
estate
Right.
auction. So
Right.
yeah, I would think.
So that would not apply. So a licensed bid caller needs to understand that he's limited to 2 commodities: personal property and cars.
Unless he has a real estate license,
License.
and the responsible party can hire him to call bids at his auction if he has a license.
Okay.
But he would have to be a licensed auctioneer under your business track.
That's
model.
correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Morris, I really like the class thing you did, and that I appreciate you doing that. So
After general discussion, do we want to kind of take in order maybe the bid call and licensure one group at a time and see where we're at with it, or what do
Well, I would probably make a motion to adopt this as the basis from which the legislature would write the law. In other words, this task force was asked to make a recommendation to the legislature, not to give them the language that they're going to use to implement it. I think we give them the basis of what our objective is, and it would be up to them to write it the way that they would want to. They're going to write it anyway. And
Exactly.
so if we can agree as a committee, and I'd love to get 100% agreement on whatever we submit, and we can, because that means that all aspects, we looked at it. I think the legislature is looking for all of us to buy into whatever we recommend, and if we can do that, then I think we'd be better off, and then allow them to write it the way that would meet these objectives. And let's make this.
Chairman, I make a motion that we use this, the Tennessee Task Force on Auction Law Modernization, as a basis for submission to the task force, plus revisions as we are now going to discuss.
I hear a second?
I second.
We've got discussion.
Okay.
I think it's putting the cart before the horse, because I'm not prepared to say.
And
Otherwise, I just don't know.
And Bob, I may have worded that wrong. What I'm trying to do is to get this on the record so we can start fleshing it out.
And
I understand.
now that we've got a motion and a second, I think we can entertain any discussion we want about any part of it. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think some of these changes would be great if there were no such thing as an online auction. It might actually be a really good thing, but the online auctions do exist and have been unregulated since 2006. And to redefine an online auction as something that needs to be regulated if the bidding is extended versus doesn't need to be regulated if the bidding ends at a specific moment in time, that's not a reasonable basis to rewrite the auction law. There's no reason to do it that way. There is no increased danger to the public one way versus the other. I don't understand how that can be a legitimate basis for moving forward with the massive expansion of the regulation of auctions in the state. Because I don't see I don't see how there's a greater chance to harm the public if you end your auctions with extended bidding versus if you just happen to call them to an end in the specific moment in time. And it would open up the possibility where an online auctioneer could avoid the regulatory regime by simply ceasing to extend bidding and continue carrying on business completely unregulated, which would actually create the paradoxical situation of having the auction law inspire an existing vendor to avoid regulation to keep their existing business model in place and actually end up doing a worse job for their client because they weren't able to extend bidding. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. So to have that be a basis for an expansion of the regulatory authority of the Auction Commission, I just have to voice my opposition to that because I think there may be legitimate reasons why auctions need to be regulated. That's possible. There are 25 states that see fit to regulate auctions, 25 states that don't. But to have it be based on whether you end an auction at a specific moment in time or whether you choose to extend the bidding, that doesn't have anything to do with the harm to the public. And that's what we're here to do, is to protect the public. So I don't see that as a legitimate basis. And I was going to ask also, we didn't get into the red line yet, but there's a paragraph in there, I think, that has to do with the second paragraph here under online auctions. It says to exempt online auctions of automobiles by companies primarily engaged in the auction industry holding a motor vehicle license. And in our materials that were distributed with the red line copy, there's a paragraph in there that I think it's number 10 in the exemptions that I think would fit into that second line there, but I'm not sure. Maybe that could be confirmed because I don't know what the source of that was. But it says, number 10, any exchange of goods conducted through bidding, some or all of which may occur on an internet-based trading platform by a publicly traded company or its subsidiary that primarily sells motor vehicles, provided such company and subsidiary is a licensed motor vehicle dealer and motor vehicle auction under Title 55, Chapter 17, Part 1. For purposes of the subdivision 10, motor vehicle means any vehicle that's self-propelled and designed to be used on highways. Now, if you read that exemption paragraph in this red line copy of the law,
I'm sorry.
I'm on page 4 of the Westlaw copy that was distributed to us in this red line, which, if that's what's contemplated under that second line, were to exempt online auctions of automobiles by companies primarily engaged in the auction industry holding a motor vehicle license. We need to be careful how that's actually implemented, and I worry that we would actually end up with a paragraph like number 10, which is a paragraph we've seen before. I believe a very similar paragraph was actually in the first draft of the bill that ultimately ended up constituting this task force. If you look at that paragraph, if you read it very carefully, it says that if you have a motor vehicle license, you can sell anything at auction online without being subject to regulation by the Tennessee Auction Commission. It may not be intended to say that, but that's what it says. And to privilege a publicly traded corporation above a small business owned by a citizen in the state of Tennessee also doesn't seem to me to be a reasonable basis to have anything to do with auction law. Why would we do that? I can't get behind a recommendation that would have any privileges put in place for a company based on whether it's publicly traded or privately held. And that, like I said, if you read that paragraph 10 very carefully, it doesn't say that the publicly traded corporation mentioned there would have to sell automobiles in order to actually take advantage of the exemption. It just says they have to be primarily selling motor vehicles, but they could do a business liquidation. They could sell out personalty from a factory. They could liquidate a farm, all in this exemption without having any jurisdiction being put in place by the Auction Commission to oversee their activity. And I just don't think that's right. So that second thing there in the online auction paragraph that you had distributed, Jeff, I just, if it ends up looking like this, I can't get behind it. And also can't get behind the definition of the timed listings and defining an online auction where it has a specific ending time rather than an extended bidding. And I understand why those things are there.
Basically, you're against having an auction law at all.
Well, actually, the default has been since 2006, the online auctions have been unregulated in Tennessee. And I ask, if you looked at also in the additional materials, I'd asked Carter to break down the complaint data based on the last 3 years, and he did that. It's on the website. You can look at now. And I think it is that we had 11 complaints over the last 3 years that were pertaining to online auctions, and we had, I think it's 3 of those had to do with any sort of extended time bidding. So we're actually regulating a fraction of the online auction business that has fewer complaints than the part that we're exempting, and that doesn't make any sense. But it really doesn't make any sense if you look at the portion of complaints at all, they've not been regulated since 2006, and the sky hasn't fallen. The public has not been harmed, and there's no outcry for this to be pushed into the regulatory regime of the Auction Commission by the public. There's a lot of people in the industry paying attention to it for a lot of reasons. And I understand why these exemptions are put here because, eBay had been responsible in the past for the 2006 exemption, and obviously we don't necessarily want to go and kick a hornet's nest and get them involved again and scrutinizing our auction law. And I also understand from some lobbying efforts that there's a large primarily online auctioneer of motor vehicles that might like just to see an exemption altogether to the auction law. And I think we've seen that organization try to exert some influence earlier on this legislation. I just think if we're going to do anything, we need to have a reasonable basis for doing it. So if it's necessary to regulate online auctions in Tennessee, well, we better regulate them. And so let's regulate them. But if it's not, and it's been this way since 2006, unregulated, let's leave it alone, because it looks to me like a lot of what we're suggesting here is a solution in search of a problem.
Mr. Chairman, I can attest that it is a problem, and I can attest to it not anecdotally but factually. The past 2 weeks, I have received phone calls from people, two different entities, apparently consigners, who want to know if I'm Music City Auction. And I said, yes, I am. And they go, well, I dropped off some stuff with you guys for you all to sell in an online auction, and I haven't heard, but this was back in May or June or whenever, and I've heard nothing from you. And I said, who are you, trying to get more information. And I said, are you all located at 103 3rd Avenue? And I go, no, I'm in the Jolton area. And I said, what is the name of the company? You sure it's Music? They said, it's Music City Estate Sales and Auction. And I go, that's not me. And so I am directly affected by unlicensed activity in an online auction in a negative way. And the only response I could give to that individual was, currently auction law in Tennessee is not regulating online auction. I'm not sure what your recourse is on this. You might want to try calling the Tennessee Auction Commission and registering your complaint with them and see what their response is. And the fact that it hasn't been a problem, it really needs to be stated as, it hasn't been a problem that has been reported, because there's currently no mechanism by which we can say these are being accurately reported. It's sort of like saying rape doesn't occur on a campus because no one reports it. And the moment you put an emphasis on it, all of a sudden people are now turning in reported rapes. And I sort of liken it to the fact, I would agree with you that that leaving the fixed time and leaving the extended time as being different is somewhat problematic. But I think what we're trying to do here is to look ahead to the future. And if we continue to stick our head in the sand about the growing field of online auction with no oversight, no regulation, it's just going to create a problem that I think is going to affect our industry in ways we can't even begin to imagine. And so I don't know if there is an answer. I think that's a nice compromise to leave the eBay law in place and then just define what a timed listing is. But I can tell you right now, online auctions that are unlicensed do have an effect on our industry, and the public has no place to turn to. And we can say small claims court, but that's not a viable not a viable opportunity because of the economics involved.
I agree, Mr. Chairman, and we have got to either include online auctions or just get rid of the auction law. I mean, that's just, an online auction is an auction just like any auction there is, whether you say it's timed or not. I think the compromise of having a timed one is the only one that is excluded, is a compromise on our part. And also the suggestion that I made in this offering here does not distinguish between a publicly traded or a non-publicly traded company. So that's not part of my suggestion. That may have been what was in the red line document.
That's my main concern. I didn't see that in there, of course, but I was kind of concerned, Jeff, that we might end up in a situation where we're looking at something like that exemption number 10.
No, I don't want to distinguish between publicly traded or non-publicly traded company.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to add the word electronic to the definition of the auction so that the Auctioneer Commission, everybody understands they are regulating the electronic part of it also.
You mean the word auction in the definition section?
Yes, just add the word electronic in there where it says orally, written, and in person now. Put electronic in there also.
Mr. Chairman, there are a number of states that take the position of using the language of competitive bid, which covers then any oral, written, electronic, or raising a paddle. So I'm not saying that I'm necessarily attached to that language, but it does mirror what other states do use. And so it's regulated by the competitive bid process, and that addresses any competitive bid process.
Mr. Marsh, you're our commission member. At one point in time, was this not the definition brought up to the Attorney General?
Yes, and we have actually been operating on that, and we've been using the Attorney General's opinion to regulate online auctions that were extended, and we've been doing that as on a case-by-case basis now. Part of why this whole task force came about was trying to implement that definition so that we have a little bit more teeth in it into the state statute.
I think you're right. There was in the auction law, it does use the word electronic, but it doesn't matter because the exemption does away with the commission's ability to regulate online auctions. And then the later interpretation of the rule that was passed to say that an auction is subject to regulation if it uses extended bidding, the Joint Government Operations Committee didn't approve the rule, and so it's not in place. And so even though the definition includes the word electronic, I think it's in a section, we can look it up, but I don't think that's the operative paragraph in the law. So that's I just point that out. And it hasn't been that the commission could regulate on online auctions with the extended bidding since beginning of 2017. That rule has not been in place. No, there's another part of it. It is definitely in the statute, but I don't think it matters. Maybe it's in the rules.
Did you see it somewhere, Mr. Lau?
Mr. Chairman,
Speaker?
We're kind of circling back around to December 16th of 2016 with the concept of a definition of electronic auctioning. And I'm encouraged to hear the opposition to, or what has so far been the opposition to looking at online auctions and regulating them, to the concept of we're either going to have auction law or we're not going to have auction law. Because I think that's at the crux of all of this. If we're not going to figure out a way to write a statute, which was what was recommended to us when that joint task force, or what was the name of the committee, Will? The joint subcommittee who did not agree with the ruling or the opinion of the AG. what was the name of the group that
The
did
Joint Government or Operations
the
Committee.
who sent it out with a negative recommendation? Their advice to us was this can't be a rule. It needs to be a statute. It needs to be debated in the legislature and made a law or not made a law. And I think that's what has brought us here today, is for us to send to the legislature what we believe to be a tract with which they can create a law which will help move the auction business in Tennessee into 2018 and beyond. And so I think fundamentally we need to either be on the page of saying we got to come up with language which includes online auctions, which may or may not be all inclusive. We may need to divide it out as fixed time and extended time. And although I can see a difference between a fixed time auction and an extended time auction, I understand the philosophical argument that why are you going to say one needs to be regulated and the other one doesn't. In one sense, the difference is an extended time auction is absolutely and unequivocally just like a live auction. Right. And a fixed time is not. So if you want to split hairs, that's the hair you can split. So while I can see the logic of saying, well, why are we carving that out? One reason we're carving it out is so we don't kick in eBay's nest. And what we're trying to do is to find compromise with a lot of disparate groups about what they're wanting and what they're not wanting. And I think the best thing we can do is to either be in agreement that we're trying to regulate and provide education and protection to the public for online auctions, or we're not. And it simply comes down to that. And if we're in favor of moving forward with online auctions, which I am, then I think we've got a good, solid basis to present to a legislature to say this is what we've come up with. This is the best way we could see moving forward with the different groups coming with different agendas. But we feel like this does it streamlines it. It makes it simpler to become an auctioneer. It gives better clarity and definition to what is now different tracks of being an auctioneer or being in the auction business model. It's something that we think would sell well throughout the United States to those states that care about it in terms of reciprocity. Mm-hmm. It is something that will bring us up to date in terms of education, because it will provide education that is relevant and is much more accessible because it's online. And I just think we all need to say, the elephant in the room has always been online auctions. Are we going to be a state that regulates online auctions? I think we should be, and I think that this format right here is the way we go about doing that.
Go ahead, Will.
One comment. If we believe that we should regulate online auctions, which I personally don't believe that, I don't think it's in the interest of the state to do it. But if we say the recommendation of the task force is that they need to be regulated, to carve out an exemption to privilege eBay above the small businesses constituted and employing folks in this state, that doesn't make any sense. And David, you alluded to that. I mean, it's there so we avoid kicking the eBay hornet's nest. I don't think that's a legitimate basis for it to be there. And so if that's the conclusion we reach, that online auctions need to be regulated, then we should regulate them, not necessarily carve out a means of selling that is going to keep us from coming into conflict with a powerful institution. That doesn't make sense. I don't think that's the place for the task force, and I would hate to see that be a basis of our recommendation.
Well, excuse me. The difference in eBay generally, most of those people are selling their own merchandise. They're not taking consignments and holding other people's money. Where we all take other people's merchandise, we got to have escrow accounts. They're selling their pots and pans or whatever they got out of their own home, so they're unregulated anyway. They can do that in any platform they want. So, I mean, it's completely different when you're holding other people's money. So, I mean, personally, either the law, the way the definition reads, it just says oral or written. So either we can get electronic in there, use RESA's version of competitive bidding, but I think you got to address the law before then you start saying we're regulating this side of the online auctions. But most of the eBay stuff is not taking consignments and selling for other people.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, but that's not what our recommendations say. They say we stick with the timed listing definition rather than saying if you happen to be holding other people's money. Now, that might be a much more reasonable way to approach revising the auction law and to regulate regardless of method of sale. But to do it based on whether you happen to end your auction at a specific moment in time or to do it whether it's going to be extended perpetually until people stop bidding, that doesn't make any sense to me. I can't get behind it as a recommendation. But you're right. Most of eBay's sales are done from party to party, but there has been a concern that to take their method altogether and make it subject to state regulation is something they wouldn't want to have a part of.
Well, it may be that it needs to be worded if you're selling for a fee. If you're selling other people's merchandise, then you fall under the Auctioneer Commission, whether it's timed or extended.
Mr. Speaker, the statutory definition of auction, going until the most favorable bid is obtained. That is not a time. That is not a fixed time ending. That's not an auction. They're using a portion of what is considered to be the auction method in terms of rising bids, but it's not ending in a way in which the most favorable bid is obtained, because time is the determining factor as to when the process ends, not the most favorable bid being obtained.
I just kind of want to step back and look at it from the perspective of what we were talking about earlier with licensees being able to choose their career path by differentiating between a fixed timed ending and an extended ending, or soft close as we call it. Then that all that does is it gives the auction business, each auction business, the opportunity to choose a path to best represent assets in the marketplace, and that may be in a fixed timed. That might be at a live auction, that might be at an on-live auction, that might be at a simulcast. And by differentiating those out, what it does is it allows the auction company, if we go with this business track approach, that gives that auction company tools in their toolbox to address what is in the best. I agree with David. I see a value in the fixed timed ending above and beyond eBay. We keep calling it the eBay exemption because eBay is the one that drove that forward at a time. And at that time, the only online auctions being conducted in the state of Tennessee were being conducted on eBay. There were no other online auctions operating in this state. Mr. McLemore was the first to implement online auctions in this state, and that was some months after that exemption was written. So at the time that that was written, the only online auctions being conducted in the state of Tennessee, not nationally, but in this state, were being conducted by eBay. But that is now an option for any auction business to elect a fixed-timed auction. And who are we to say what they can and can't choose from? Give them all their.
Will's point, I think that if we could write it some way, I don't like either timed or not timed or whatever. I do think that if you're a person who takes other people's stuff under any circumstances and sells it for a commission or a fee or however you get compensated, and you hold that money and then pay to the person that you've sold it for, I think you ought to have an auction license, and whether it be timed or untimed or whatever. I just think now, like Kenny said, a guy selling his own stuff can go online and put their stuff up on eBay, sell it all day long. They're exempt. We already have that exemption in place. We leave that exemption in place for anybody selling their own stuff. But if you take other people's money and you're responsible for it, I think that we ought to have that person held responsible under the auction law. Period.
I think we're getting our logic in the same place, but I think we're getting at different conclusions. I understand, I hear where you're coming from, Jeff, and I like that thought because it makes good sense to me. I just don't get to the same place that you do. I think we'd be better off, because we have been better off since 2006, to leave it alone. But if we have a difference of opinion here, we may not be able to reconcile that.
That's probably true.
Mr. Connor?
I have a question about the timed listing and how these operate. And I don't know if, I can see one thing if you're talking about a simulcast and something going over the web where you've got people clearly sending in and submitting and soliciting bids. That is like a regular auction. As I understand a lot of the online sites, you put things online for auction and there is a software programming matter to prevent sniping. So someone doesn't come in the last 30 seconds or minute or however it's defined and throw a bid in, that action by a bidder will trigger an extension just for the fairness of everybody else. To Will's point earlier, I would hate to, if we leave it exactly as it is, and that sniping provision and that programming is out there to help protect the people involved in bidding, I would hate to set something up where we're encouraging online auctions to say, well, we'll have to eliminate the software programming and we're just going to allow sniping on online auctions in order to keep from being regulated.
I agree with you, David, and that's why I said if you're selling for others, whether timed or untimed, I still think you ought to come under the auction law. And where you run into problems is there's so many people that aren't reputable, that are taking stuff, they're selling stuff they don't know what it is, they're misrepresenting what it is, and you have to have somebody responsible and have a process in place for having that responsibility, tested. And that's why I think it ought to become under the auction law, or to get to where Will wants to go, just eliminate all of it.
Personally, I think if we can get it to where if you're taking consignments, you fall under the auction law, I think every auctioneer will get behind that.
One won't.
I mean,
I hate to say, but one vote on all of them in the whole state is not going to. We need to work for what's best for the consumer and what's best for the auctioneers that's out there right now. So, I mean, that's where I am.
I don't know how many as far as I'm aware of, eBay is about the only platform now that ends at a specific time. Are there other? I'm sure there's probably a few more.
There's actually an example, and it's an interesting example of an auctioneer in Clarksville I talked to who was unaware of the ruling of the Joint Government Operations Committee on extended time bidding and changed his business practices to avoid regulation by just ending his auctions on a fixed time. Because all software packages that I'm aware of allow you to do that. Most people don't, because for the reason that Mr. Connor mentioned and also for other reasons that he didn't mention, but there's, on the buyer side and on the seller side, generally a better experience to extend the bid, and that's pretty well universally recognized. But this auctioneer in Clarksville turned off that feature because he decided that was going to be the way he would deal with the regulation of online auctions in Tennessee. And I talked to him since then. I don't know if he turned it back on or not after the Joint Government Operations Committee said that it wasn't subject to regulation, but he did make that decision. And so I know there are others out there who do it.
Follow-up suggestion. I said I may be completely naive about this. Is there a way, instead of doing this distinction between timed and untimed, of recognizing whether or not there is human discretion involved? Is the auctioneer involved in actively engaging additional bids, as opposed to something where it's like a bid came in the last 30 seconds, the software triggered another 2 minutes, or however it goes? They're not soliciting bids or not doing things. It's just a matter of we're trying to prevent someone from gaming the system. Is there a way of drawing a distinction there in some way?
essentially that is not really an issue. And the reason why I'm saying that is when you have extended time bidding, what is happening is the computer is essentially the auctioneer. The software is attempting to recognize additional bids in the same way that someone standing up in front of a crowd would be canvassing the crowd to see if anybody else wants to bid. And so the distinction is imperceptible between what the computer and its software is doing versus what a live auctioneer is doing. Both of everything else is exactly the same. In other words, the person running the program is taking in somebody else's money. The person running the program theoretically should have knowledge about the process and the items that they're selling. To go to Will's point about an answer in search of a problem, I don't think anybody's concerned whether or not somebody's trying to game the system in terms of an extended time listing. Like that is a problem. The system is set up. I mean, software is set up in such a way it's pretty straightforward. If you get a bid within a certain period of time, it's going to allow for more bidding. And if I, as an auctioneer standing up in front of somebody, get a bid, I'm going to go look for some more bids. At some point, I'll stop my process, which is a little arbitrary. It could take 5 minutes. It could take a minute. It could take 20 seconds. If it's a piece of real estate, it might take 20 minutes. Okay. The software will give you a more definitive time, but that's the only difference. It'll extend it 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. And so if something comes in within that 3 minute period, we're going to start that 3 minute period over again. Just as if I got a bid in a live situation, I would go back to the process of looking for more bids for a certain period of time. And it's really not, I don't believe, maybe I misunderstood your question. It's not really a concern as to whether or not somebody could somehow manipulate the extended time software to gain some kind of an advantage. So maybe I misunderstood.
I'm not talking about gaming I'm talking about people right now sniping on auctions so they can sit out there and.
I don't think sniping's possible in an extended time.
It's
Well, that's
designed
right,
to
yeah.
prevent it.
That's what I'm saying.
I
I
think
don't
What
want
do you-
to. I don't want to encourage people to do away with the extended time software so that you go
Right.
back to these fixed time that everything gets sniped.
Right.
I think what you're saying is it automatic? Yeah, it's automatic. You turn it on and it behaves a certain way. It's got a process it follows and it does it that same way every time. And so it's not a matter of manually watching it and making that happen or not. It's just a matter of watching what happens as the bids come in.
And to go to his point about the guy in Clarksville, I don't know too many auctioneers who would sacrifice extended time bidding just so they could worry about sniping in a time listing situation.
Want to take about a 10-minute break?
I've got one, I guess,
Okay.
question. As the public member, I definitely know the least about this on this group, but just on a basic level, my perspective would be you don't want to implement new regulations. Curious, you're obviously against regulating online auctions. I'm curious, just on a basic level, response to that from those of you that think we do need to regulate them. Why are those negative ramifications outweighed by the need to regulate online auctions?
That's a really good question. I think you're getting at the crux of the issue. If you look at the context of the auctioneering profession in the United States, and I've had a good opportunity to understand that. Of course, I've been an auctioneer since 1999 and have recently completed a 3-year term on the board of directors of the National Auctioneers Association, and so I'm really familiar with the practices and the regulatory regime in the auction business as a whole nationwide. And it's really interesting. It's an interesting profession that comes up in a lot of case studies when people talk about regulatory matters, and those regulatory issues have been a sort of a hot button topic. That's really one of the few places where there's been some bipartisan support to try to figure out how to take a close look at whether the state needs to be in the business of regulating certain businesses altogether. Auctioneering has come up frequently, and right now it's split where the country has 25 states that have chosen to regulate auctions, and it has 25 states that have chosen not to at all. The states that have chosen not to regulate auctions have been primarily in the western United States, although that's not complete. There's some examples in New England. And it's different. It's interesting because the auction business has thrived in both locations. There are great auctions in Colorado, and there are great auctions in Tennessee. And you can't really draw a conclusion to say it's impacted the business more than one way or the other, but it certainly is something that impacts those who'd like to get into business in Tennessee. The regulatory regime that exists now has required education, which and has frankly not applied in the past to those who are practitioners of the online part of the business. And so it's been a waste of resources. And then there's also been the definition of what an auctioneer is has required for a lot of people who might not otherwise not have a license to become licensed in order to comply strictly with the rules and with the auction code. Those folks say they were going to talk about the details of the assets to be sold. It's according to the definition, some of them should be licensed if the conversations begin to get beyond a certain point. And it's really hard as a business owner to make sure your human resources department's running in compliance with that definition because the jobs are fluid in a 21st century business. And also personnel, say if you're operating in one state, that's great, but if you're operating across state lines, personnel having to hold multiple licenses simply just to pick up the phone and talk about an auction with a potential client is problematic. And may not be in the interest of the public because the regulatory costs may actually increase the cost of the service paid by the consumer of auction services within the state. Because we're here working on regulatory matters, we're not making any money, and anytime we're dealing with compliance, we're also not making any money, and so that's got to be picked up for. We've got to maintain some sort of profitability or go out of business. So these things are not free that we do, and the regulating of auctioneers is certainly not free or without cost. It's going to have a cost, and that cost is going to be borne by the consumer. The question is there enough potential harm, or is there no other form of recourse that anybody who is harmed by an auctioneer, can they take that? And take it elsewhere and see that harm redressed. Well, we've got the civil court system, the small claims court. David mentioned that wasn't adequate. I'm not so sure about that I agree with it. You can a lawsuit is something that for auctioneers I know that is something they hope never see the other side of. It acts as an incentive for all of us to behave and treat our clients right. And it's a huge. It's the threat of being sued is certainly on my mind every contract I write, and I don't know an auctioneer who's a professional and is seriously in this business who doesn't feel the same way. So the state providing a means of being able to redress a harm or trying to protect the public, there's a real debate as to whether the commissions that exist here, particularly the auction commission in this and 24 other states, do a better job of protecting incumbent interest, or do they do a better job of protecting the public? And we've had a really interesting natural experiment since 2006 to have online auctions completely unregulated in the state, and we've certainly not seen more than average number of complaints coming from that. Matter of fact, we've been seeing a smaller number of complaints based on the percentage of business, and this is an estimate, that the percentage of business over time that's actually conducted online has grown, and the number of complaints has certainly not. So I just don't see the need for it. It is, if you're going to have the activity, the state make a deliberate act to go in and regulate auctions to address the public harm. That requires the time, effort, resources, and attention of the state, which I just don't think that the scrutiny of the auction profession merits that. It's not because people can't steal, but we're also not going to be able to legislate out thieves. They're going to exist, and we have to do our best to treat our clients right and not join their ranks. So that's my opinion about it.
2 points. One, because online auctions are not regulated, I don't know that we get complaints on every online auction that would be filed if it were regulated. So to say that we don't have the complaints, I don't think that's a fair statement, because you don't know whether we would or we wouldn't based on the fact that we're unregulated. Secondly, in any profession, and we as auctioneers, we're always trying, and as you've tried to, Will, has been on the board, is to elevate the auction profession as a profession. And I think to say that we should be completely unregulated and just let anybody be an auctioneer that wants to be one, I think debases the profession itself. I think there ought to be some hoops you have to jump through in order to be an auction professional. I think you ought to have a license to prove that you are a professional, and that you have the competency in that profession to prove that you are able to do that. And to say, well, we just unregulate everybody that's doing online auctions, I think it's a terrible mistake, and it debases the profession itself.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Miller, the other thing you might want to think about is the auction profession is set up to handle, for the most part, other people's assets. Just in the same way that a stockbroker handles your retirement account, they have to jump through hoops. They have to be regulated, whether they're online or however the process is. The government, and I'm not an advocate of government oversight unless I think there's a need for it. The government sort of recognizes a couple of things as needing some education and oversight, and that would be personal health, that would be assets, financial assets, and that would be dwellings. You know, you can't just go out and say I'm a contractor and build a building without oversight into the electrical and the plumbing and all the other stuff. You can't go and take somebody's money from, that they've earned a living and invest it without having some type of education. It is entirely feasible and most likely possible that an auctioneer can literally ruin the family economic tree of someone, because we're dealing with estates. It's $1 billion industry, and nationwide it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And to sort of say, just because it's online and we hadn't had any complaints, we should just deregulate the whole thing, that just flies in the face of common sense, because the potential for damage is much too great, in my opinion, to not at least say we're trying to make this a profession where professionals are involved in it. And the fact that it doesn't exist in 25 other states, one has to look at the auction activity in those states in order to make a fair assessment. It's sort of apples and oranges. Yes, much of the West Coast or the Western states do not participate in auction regulation and oversight and that kind of thing, but they don't hold a lot of auctions. And it's not an accepted way to do business the same way it is in the states that do have regulation. Those laws came into effect for a reason. Somebody got screwed, and somebody's grandmother 80 years ago lost her farm and her estate, and some legislature said, we got to do something about this. And that's how most laws come into effect. And for us to simply make the delineation that a certain portion of how business is conducted shouldn't be regulated because it hasn't been regulated, to me is a fairly flimsy excuse. Now, part of the problem, or part of the challenge of this task of this oversight committee, was to make it easier for entry into this profession, to not put up barriers. And that's what the remaining 5 pages is about. But I think if we can take the remaining 5 pages and implement most, if not all, of what's in here in some form or fashion, then the concession to that sort of lessening of the entry level into the auction profession and a better understanding of who can be what and do what, that means we also need to not turn our head and say, but online auctions don't count.
I like statistics because you can look at things from a lot of different perspectives. And so I agree with a lot of what Mr. McLemore said. But again, like Mr. Allen pointed out, we have an incredible number of auctions in the state of Tennessee, whereas the state of Wyoming does not. Okay, so we have a Tennessee Auctioneer Association of professional members, whereas in the western states they have a Western Association of a group of states to come up with the equivalent numbers. In the state of Tennessee right now we have just shy of 2,500 licensees that are actively licensed by the Auctioneer Commission. Of those, because we manage, Nashville Auction School does hold a contract with the Auction Commission, and we do mailings and continuing education. So I am managing that list of auctioneers, and I would be hard pressed in going through that list to come up with 250, 10% of those licensees that are currently engaged in online auctions. I would say it would be probably more like 100 of those 2,500 licensees. So when Mr. McLemore says we've had a social experiment going on since 2006, I'm going to take issue with that. I'm also going to say that of those that are engaged in online auctions currently, most of those have gotten into the online auction business in the last 5 years. There have been a handful. Mr. McLemore, like I said, was the first. There have been a handful of them in this state. And that's what I think we need to be most concerned about is what is the auction atmosphere in this state, and then how does that branch out from here? So when we look at a low number of complaints, we're looking at a low number of complaints on a low number of people as opposed to a larger industry. And from my seat, and Will and I can agree on this all day long, I have a different perspective because we are seeing people as they come in to enter into the auction industry. We are seeing them in continuing education seminars, and so we are communicating with our students in an ongoing regular basis. So I see a different perspective. So I do also hear about the problems. I also hear about the bad players and the good players. This board is not representative of the entire industry because what you have on this board are committed professionals. You have members of the Tennessee Auctioneer Association. You have members of the National Auctioneers Association. You have the chairman of the National Administration on this board who are, most of us in the auction business are engaged in online auctions, and then our chairman is not, correct? Correct. And so, but when you look at the 2,500 licensees in the state of Tennessee, the vast majority of them are not involved in online education, online auctions. And so my perspective is 100% behind making it easier for people to get into the industry, making it easier for people to engage in online auctions, because it is a very valuable tool for taking clients and consumers' assets into the market. It does afford a lot of profitability, but when we open it up to 2,500 people as opposed to 100 or 200 or 300 people, then we run some inherent risks with that. And I think that we're trying, from my perspective, trying to be proactive in eliminating problems before they are a problem. So there are huge problems in other states. Unregulated states. Consumers are going to not only through the courts, but through the consumer protection programs in their state. So there are accessing records on consumer complaints in those unregulated states is difficult because we don't always know where to look. But because we are also national educators, I have a perspective on some of those issues as well. So my primary focus here is making sure that if someone does get into online auctions or live auctions, that they are getting into that with a basic core knowledge of how to proceed in an honest, ethical, and competent way. So in that regard, that's where the regulation just provides a framework to operate in for those people. Because the majority of the licensees in the state of Tennessee are going to be engaging in online auctions. They're not doing it right now.
Chairman, to Russ's point, I am the president of the National Association of Licensed Law Officials of America, which is a long-winded say. It's a small group of people, but it's all the licensed law officials that are battling with auction law around the country. We have our meeting twice a year, one by phone and one at the NAA convention conference and show. Every single state that's a member of that organization brings up online auctions at every meeting. That's one thing that they are wrestling with, and So it is a concern, and I will tell you, and Will, you know, from going to conference and show, that the number one trend on the rise is online auction for auctioneers. I mean, that everything was talking about at this past convention was online, and everybody's going to it. And so I think we do have to get out ahead of it. I think it's important that we address it in what we're doing, and it is a problem, even though you're sort of in self-serving in the way that you're presenting this, but it is a problem.
Just 2 points. About the 25 states that regulate auctions, there are 6, I think, or 7, depending on how you count them, that do regulate online auctions in some way. And so that gives you a little bit of information. And it's true that Jeff's, what he's talking about, different states are trying to figure out how to deal with online auctions and their increasing prevalence from a regulatory perspective. And so if they're regulating auctions right now, there's some that have taken a position that they're to be regulated, others not. Then the one other thing I'd draw attention to that is available to a consumer now that wasn't when the auction statute was written, I think is in 1968, is the internet, and but more specifically, social media. It is so easy for someone to go online now and give me a negative review if they believe I've treated them poorly. And unlike a court proceeding, there's no appeal to that. If it goes down as a bad recommendation or a bad review on Google, I can't even reply. So it is. Yelp, Facebook, and Google reviews are available to a consumer now. And so also is the ability to do research about any particular vendor from a telephone that they might be able to carry around with them every day. That wasn't in place in 1968 when the auction law was put in, and it is now. And so it gives a lot more transparency and visibility into the vendors and who are conducting business here.
Mr. Speaker, just to respond specifically to that point, you know, the internet you can make it what you want to make it. I mean, you can tell 25 of your friends to go leave a negative review on your company, and that may or may not be an accurate reflection of your company, in the same way that you can get 25 of your friends to leave a positive review. So to suggest that because the internet is there, it's a good safety check to a person's business is probably a little pie in the sky thinking.
Idea. Let's take about a 10-minute break. Report back about 10:30.
Daylight savings time. There you go. No.
Well, I think I'm technically I was
appointed by the governor.
Oh yeah, it was yes, that's right.
I'm glad.
Testing.
Well, the law says if to be an auctioneer, if you receive a fee for service, which would
Right.
yeah, no,
But I see what you're doing with
yeah. If you say if you're
We could go with either one, timed or extended, if you're doing it for a fee.
if it's somebody else's stuff.
Yeah. It's just figuring out how that needs to be worded.
Exactly right.
There's some other stuff though that was in the red line that probably should be added in.
but they have to have
They have to be
licensure.
more licensed.
They have to have
but that's not what
licensure
it says.
specific to that commodity.
Will, I think the word real estate and motor vehicle was in the.
I don't have a problem with what you're talking about. So that begs the question: if you can go. What point are you saying? So if it's personal property. Right. And I could just see, but my point is I can see the real estate commission pushing. Know to be true, which is so much more true than it is for. Leveling business to a particular auctioneer.
Well, do you think just
Right, correct, yeah.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because that's the whole bird dogging law that says they can't pay, you can't pay somebody unless they're like. Well, I mean, Will, you and I have been doing this dance.
I said, hey, if there was no such thing as an online auction, this is all great.
Yeah. And I fall on the line of, and I've said this to you before. But it's about perception. The public isn't about, well, great. Right. I think you can do more. I think you're right, but I think you can do more than that. I think you can announce to the public that we have an apparatus.
On licensing, they should take a position.
I agree.
That, and if the NAA was looking.
Yeah, but the type of person who would feel the need to do that would. Which is why I'm saying that is a loophole which needs to be closed. I don't think it needs to be closed. Yeah, no, I get it.
I know that.
Yeah.
At least you and I are living in the same world.
Right. There is right. Yeah.
We see that that's a.
Yeah.
That that's out
and,
there.
and in the past 4 years.
Kenny might say something.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be like, well, actually.
We just come a
It's
different.
just like but I think because of X.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And you think
That's not the
because of
same
X,
thing, which is not the same thing as hearing Kenny describe the problem, and it is in no way describing
It's
the
a
problem.
fake news.
Right, exactly.
Kenny is not
Yeah.
He's not giving any fake news.
Right, yeah.
There's no fake news in this.
Right.
Which is thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Hey, is there something out there we
No.
can get a Coke or something? There's a
They
vending,
found one.
No, my goodness. No.
Yes.
it's got like a vending machine or something.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go lunch or something.
It's not the worst coffee in the world. It's not.
I'm not a
as bad
coffee
as-
guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's soft drinks and.
I was going to get
snacks
soft here,
and-
but I'll wait. I will wait. I thought you did a good job of reading there.
Yeah, I'm gonna find it to take out. Those two.
Well, but but before you do that, Jeff, here's the problem I would have with that. Talk about that today. So I would say leave almost to the fact where I would say, why don't we?
All right, so here.
Right.
In this section, does anybody have any objection to what's written?
Hey, James, Come here.
Here's
Here's what you
Here's
need
what
to
I
do.
suggest you do. When you come back in, let's take this.
Go from
and-
point A to point B.
and
Okay.
get- And then
See how the
they,
cars don't.
we'll
we get
we're in
down to-
agreement on.
Or later today if
Or
we
later,
get,
however.
if we get time for it. But we hadn't heard from her.
Good, we're in school, so he's
That's
covering
where
today.
we can do that.
Hopefully,
You'll have some students when you get back.
I'll tell you what, the auction school world is just so unpredictable. We had,
Say, is everybody okay with this and this and this? Then we get to the sticking points. We put
Or even if it's 11:15, allow
boom,
for.
boom, boom. And so then we start. So we start
I would
out.
agree,
We-
but
Scheduled in on-
exactly,
on
and that would be the
Saturday.
time to have it.
I
I mean, I have no idea how many I'll have when I get back.
think we're about ready to go back. It seems like from hearing two or three sides of this, I think maybe what we need to do is since Mr. Morris's document is here, let's just go from that at the beginning and go down as far as the tracks that he has on here, and just basically if anybody has any trouble with the caller of bids part of it, the bid calling licensure, and we'll just take this one at a time and see if we can get some consensus on part of this. And if we have to put some of it off to later, we'll have some time at the end maybe to do that, or at the next meeting. So does anybody have any trouble with the bid calling as far as redefining an affiliate instead of an apprentice auctioneer, dropping the requirement from 2 years to 1?
Wait, Mr. Chairman, are you, because that just jumped off that first page to, the first page I have is ease of
Okay.
entry, and we ought
And the
to,
bid calling licensure.
and the bid, and the three license tracks. And so now we're the first of the bid calling licensure. So can we stick with that one and then literally move to and indicate where you're moving after we've said we're good with that.
All right. Anybody have any trouble with the bid call, the ease of entry? I would not think anybody would have any trouble with, and then dropping down to the bid call and licensure and ending where business track begins.
Well, we could even go so far as to say, does anybody have any objection to having three different classes of
Auctioneers.
auctioneers? Does everybody understand that concept? Is everybody okay with having a separate class of auctioneers so that we can basically enable to have a bid calling class? Does anybody have any problem with that part of it?
I make a motion that can we vote at this point? Can we vote on just that little simple aspect of it and say,
I think we can pull that part apart of the
and
original
just vote
part,
and say,
vote on
we
that
like the
part?
fact that we're now going to try to divide things into three separate classes. I make a motion that we vote on the three suggested license tracks as a way to move forward and defining what an auctioneer can be.
Second.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
And then we can look at bid calling licensure and amend or accept or do whatever is currently written there. Mr. Chairman?
We need to get it on the floor, so yes, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, I'd like to, some brief discussion. I am concerned, but I think it was addressed. I am concerned that by now creating these types of classes as it pertains to the person who wants to be the bid caller, that we're not unduly or unfairly hamstringing somebody from being able to be the bid caller in some other state. But if I'm not mistaken, we said it would just put more onus on them to know what other states would require of them, and that's okay.
And I also think this is sort of groundbreaking in that I don't know of any other state that's doing this, and it may be Tennessee leading the way in making it easier for these guys to get licensed in other states.
I have a question. Do you, what if you exempted them rather than making a separate class of licensure? Because they're not involved in dealing with direct management of other people's funds or anything else. They're acting as an employee typically, or a contractor to someone who would have this business track license. Is it necessary to regulate them separately?
I think it goes to the profession again in terms of having these guys be able to say, yes, I'm a licensed auctioneer in Tennessee, and I'm a licensed bid caller in the state of Tennessee. And I think just to say, well, we're going to exempt anybody that don't have to have a license in Tennessee to call bids, I think that, again, goes to lessening the professionalism of the licensees in this state, and I would rather have them licensed and have some general knowledge about what the auction law is, what the contracts are, and that sort of thing. You know, there's ethics involved, there's professionalism involved, and those are all part of the core courses that they're going to take in obtaining this license.
And Mr. Chairman, would it also not be important to have that licensure because people coming from other states wanting to simply bid call here, I'm assuming the reciprocity would simply just have to meet this standard, which is much less inclusive, but it would also require them to be able to, they'd have to say, yeah, well, I've met those core requirements, so we're making it easier for people from other states to come in, but we're not just saying anybody can come in and do this. You still have to have some reciprocity and education. Okay.
And I agree with that as well. And I think because the auction industry is becoming, is going across state lines so much more now, what we have is we do have people coming into the state of Tennessee and making sure that they have some kind of what Tennessee laws are, what they can and can't do, and, the whole issue. So I agree that we need to continue to regulate bid callers. But it's a low entry. So what it does is it takes away financial barriers, it takes away time barriers, it takes away educational barriers so that anyone can begin earning a living as an auctioneer with very few. In order to be a bid caller, we would certainly recommend that you receive instruction in being a bid caller. However, there are a lot of self-taught bid callers, or if they come from a state where they served an apprenticeship in order to get their license, they don't need bid calling instruction to be a bid caller. The marketplace will weed those out. If they're not good at it, they won't get their jobs.
And we also see a lot of second and third generational guys that grow up with their family business that they learn from their dad how to call bids, and so they come to auction school already knowing a whole lot about that part of it. What they don't know is the actual law itself.
So that doesn't take away from instruction on auction?
Not at all. Not at all. That would be in addition to.
And part of it, if more of them become available online, it'd be hard to get instruction online for that as well.
I just want to make sure it didn't exclude.
Right. Thank you for that.
Any other comments?
I make a motion that we accept the bid calling licensure section as is.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion?
I'll comment, just say, I think these folks are going to be supervised by a business owner, and I don't see the need to regulate them. They're hired guns flying in, strictly to bid call, and if we're not going to, essentially y'all are saying that the market is going to take care of their employment. You're only going to hire a proficient bid caller in the first place. I just don't see a need to regulate them beyond that because the market's already scrutinizing their ability to actually do what it is that they're been hired to do. I just don't see a need to do it. That's my comment. So I'll vote against this.
Any other discussion? Assume we're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Motion carries. Discussion on business track.
And this section basically is the auctioneer that we have today, and most auctioneers would be classified as a Class B auctioneer that have an auctioneer's license today. Again, it has a higher level of entry than the bid caller itself. It gets into asset-specific instruction, and then as far as the law and the technology, advertising, the math, the escrow, sales tax, all of the things in terms of being able to actually conduct the business of an auction. I never will forget when I first got into the business, they said calling the bids is little or none to do with the auction business. And everybody wants to be a bid caller. And I will tell you that the auction business is the business track. And so those are all the things it takes to be in that business, and I think it's a good way of separating. And again, we talked about being more reciprocal with other states, which I think is a good thing, and it does eliminate this gallery versus a non-gallery, and it also eliminates the firm license, which I think is a good thing. Where I am, I'm licensed in Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, and I got to have 2 licenses in every state. And if I can have, and actually you have to have 4 licenses in every state if you sell real estate. So, if we can eliminate some of those licenses, I think it's a good thing.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. I did have one question about the apprenticeship. Change this to affiliate auctioneer that is experience-based with participation in certain number of auctions or auction-related activities, no time limitations on an affiliate license. So we're reducing the suggesting reducing the apprenticeship time to 1 year with no logbook required. The only problem I have with that is that how do we know that 1 year was an instructional period for that apprentice or affiliate? In other words, we have no record of which was the purpose of the logbook, was to say, he or she was not only under my tutelage, but on this date they did this thing. And we know they at least got some instruction during that. If we're going to get rid of the logbook, and we had some discussion about this before, 1 year is once again somewhat of an arbitrary time frame. It used to be 2 years. I would want us to take a look, and instead of saying it has to do with time, it has to do with an accomplishment of goals, which is sort of going back to the logbook situation. But maybe we redefine what we're expecting of the affiliate auctioneer, and if they get that finished, let's say within 6 months, because if you're with an auction company that's doing, 5 auctions a month, then you can easily instruct that individual. I mean, there's no sense in keeping them in an arbitrary year setting when they've had more experience in 3 months than other auctioneers might have in a year's period of time. So I'd like for us to look at the possibility of not talking about any time of apprenticeship time, and rather look at it more being accomplishments. And then if we want to put something, as or not less than, 3 months or something like that, so they can't, get it all in a week or something like that.
I would like to see that be 6 months or something like
Yeah.
And you still have to have the sponsor and auctioneer to sign off, correct?
Correct.
So he's going to have to kind of give his approval.
Yeah.
And now, in reality, how do we know how that's handled? We really don't.
We don't, but we haven't ever.
The logbook the same way.
Right. But at least what we're expecting of that affiliate is that they be exposed to certain aspects of the actual auction process. And where it would really be important is an understanding and exposure to online auctions. Because there's nothing in the current logbook which talks about the ability of an affiliate, or what we're now calling an affiliate auctioneer, having any understanding of how online auctions work. And I think it's important to at least address that to some degree.
Do we even need to have an affiliate?
Well, I think it's certainly.
Other states don't.
Other states don't. I guess not. But I also know that, boy, it sure does. It sure does help if you're talking with somebody who has said, "I will mentor you," and I'm assuming.
But if you can pass, if you have the knowledge and you can pass the test and you can do all that, I mean, what makes you?
We're putting a whole lot of faith in that test.
I understand.
Then
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I could probably argue both sides of that, so I'm not going to get hung up on either one of them, and I think I would probably go along with either. I do know when we look at, again, our neighboring states, so Commissioner Morris is licensed in Mississippi. They have, you come to auction school, you pass that Mississippi test, and you are an auctioneer from day one. You take Kentucky, and they've had some recent law changes, so I can't say that this is exactly how it is today, although I should be able to, but I just can't. They have had a system of kind of quantitative measures that once that affiliate or apprentice in their state participated in 10 auctions, okay, then they were eligible. Now, what we currently have is we have a point system based on auction activities, where you get points for calling bids, you get points for writing a contract, you get points for drawing up auction advertisement. We go to great lengths to try to educate them on how to write an auction ad, but until you write an auction ad, you don't write an auction ad. There is some value in that apprenticeship, provided that the apprentice or the affiliate has a good mentor to guide them through. And then there are those who never learn anything in that time period too. So, either way, I personally tend to like the quantitative thing, that they get some experience, whether that's in a live auction or an online auction, again, because so many companies are not actively participating in online auctions right now. I would be reluctant to make that a requirement, but certainly would accept it as an activity, if that makes any sense.
I'm kind of leaning, like you, leaning towards, if they accumulate the points, where they do it in 6 months or a year or whatever it is,
I agree, not a week, because I don't think that would be a reasonable time frame to do that.
I mean,
so
I make a motion that we change the language from reduce apprenticeship time to 1 year with no logbook required to say that we reduce the apprenticeship time to no less than 6 months with a redefined logbook.
Okay. I'll go along with that. We come up with a point system.
And we don't have to come up with that today.
No,
That would be something that the commission would
commission
have to
would
come
come
up
That's
with.
right,
Yeah. We do that in our rules, but
based on experience,
Yeah,
the logbook
right,
based
yeah.
on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
yeah. I
And
agree.
then those issues can be addressed at that time.
Right.
So no less than 6 months with a redefined logbook requirement.
Based on experience.
Yeah.
Motion to amend.
Demonstrating experience, yeah.
Mr. Connor?
Did you get your Motion and second.
We ain't gotten a second yet.
I second that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, trying to clarify, I can't find it in here. Is there a requirement that you have an apprenticeship license or an affiliate license for a period of time before you could apply for the business track? Because I
Years.
didn't. Okay.
Well, currently, in order to become a licensed auctioneer, you have to attend 80-hour course, 2 years, and get 1,000 points through a point system with a logbook that keeps track of that.
That's just in the current law. That's not in what you're
Yeah,
looking
it's
at
And
now.
the business track that we just approved,
We're-
does it require an affiliate or apprenticeship?
That's part of it.
That's part of the business track, is that you would first serve as an apprentice. You'd have to get your education. You'd serve as an apprentice. You'd, at this point, serve no less than 6 months as an apprentice and get a redefined logbook. But after that period of time, you could now consider yourself to be an auctioneer with a business track.
It starts at the bottom of that page of where it says business track.
I just couldn't tell from the materials
Yeah.
if they're two separate licenses. You can only go for one, or if the
Yeah,
apprenticeship
you
was
start.
required.
Yeah, you
Start
start with
with
apprentice license, and then you trade that in after 2 years. So
In this case, hopefully less
Yeah.
than 6 months or
Right.
whatever.
We may need to clarify that in the final document.
Oh,
right,
That's just-
exactly.
Chairman, I got a comment I'd like to make about this. This is a really crucial part of the regulation of the auctioneers within the state, because this is, I mean, if you're a bid caller, you're supervised by a person who would have this. If you're running an auction business of any type, this is the license where you're permitted to be able to manage and conduct auctions in Tennessee. And I think it's important to look at this not necessarily from how you might necessarily progress from affiliating with an auction company, training under an auctioneer, and then ultimately getting your own firm and hanging your own shingle or getting your own auction business license. But I think it'd be instructive to look at this through the lens of reciprocity and through the lens of cost to the consumer. If your auction service might work just as well in the state of Mississippi or Alabama or Kentucky or any other of the surrounding states in Tennessee, but you can't just go up there and conduct an auction because there's a license regime that you have to comply with. And in our business, you end up with sellers who hire us because we can offer a sale of assets on a set time frame, often very quickly. And so a lot of times it's impossible to contemplate even attempting to comply with the license regime where you're not already licensed to be able to do work, even if you've got a client who wants to hire you to go and do that. And unfortunately, the states that surround us are typically licensed states. And again, you find yourself in a position where the best way to address the issue is either turn down the business, which doesn't help the state earn any income on our taxes or anything else, and doesn't help us prosper as auctioneers, or you can bring in a joint venture partner who can comply immediately with the license law, and that increases the cost to the consumer. And so the license law itself has a cost. And if somebody called me up now to go do an auction in Colorado, I could go out there and do that auction with zero additional cost for compliance. But if in Kentucky, that's going to cost a significant portion of the transaction cost. And so there's only one party that's going to bear that cost, and that's the consignor who would pay a premium to hire me if I wanted to go and do a sale out of state. And so if you think about it like that, and you look at whether Tennessee auctioneers benefit by making it difficult to get approval to do an auction within the state, or whether Tennessee auctioneers benefit by making it easy, we have a lot of states that surround us, and I would really like to be able to go as a licensed auctioneer to go and do sales in other states. And I think that that's not possible now without bringing in additional parties and increasing cost. I think that Tennessee could make a statement in that direction to say, look, come from out of state, submit to supervision from out of state, and then make sure you conduct a good sale. But you can go and do that immediately on an auction time frame, not on a 6 month from now time frame, which is what it is to comply. And so if you look at that, there's an example that Russ and I were talking about earlier. She had mentioned there's an auctioneer, I think, from Wisconsin, is a non-licensed, Minnesota is a non-licensed state. And this auctioneer has lots and lots of experience. And for this auctioneer to be able to actually get to be licensed in the state of Tennessee, they'd have to come in and go to auction school again, because the auction school this auctioneer went to decades ago is out of business now, can't provide a certificate. Have to go to auction school again, then would have to find an auctioneer in Tennessee where they could hang their license and go through the apprenticeship for 2 years, then before they could actually submit an application and get an auction license in the first place. And Ressa was saying that's patently unfair to anybody who's coming to try to do business here, because there might be a consumer in the state that'd like to hire this guy because he's a specialist, he's the best in the world at selling whatever asset, and why not let him earn his business here? We'd like to be treated the same in Minnesota. But if you take that logic and apply, if you make it where that person can come because of his experience and can just submit an application directly for the auction business license, well, that's not fair to the folks that actually came up in the business within the state. And so if you privilege an out-of-state auctioneer by giving them a means to apply their experience to sit directly for the auction business license, then it's not fair to somebody who, say, worked as a non-licensed employee in an auction business for more than a decade, knew the business backwards and forwards, and would be ready to sit for a test any day to be able to hang their own shingle. Imagine that they got in a dispute with their previous employer and found themselves having to again go forward and sit for an apprenticeship of some sort before they could actually, earn a living or put a meal on the table. This is where we have to be careful, and it's one of the reasons why I think we might be better off with no regulation than we would be with regulation, because we've made it where people from out of state could actually come in. If we give them a means to be able to sit for a state with a privilege based on their experience, we're disadvantaging the citizens of our own state. Then if we advantage the citizens of our state and exclude those from out of state, well, we can only expect to be treated equally by the states that surround us, and there are a lot of them. So this is where I think we need to be really careful about how we are making it. And what I think we might want to do is, why not just give someone a means to be able to go, whether they're in-state or out-of-state, submit to the jurisdiction of the laws of Tennessee and go and do the auction that their clients want to hire them for, and let the market sort out who's suitable for that or not.
I think we sort of addressed that. We're allowing reciprocity with these states, so we're not saying that they can't come in and immediately do business in the state of Tennessee. We're not saying you have to go get an affiliate license before you can get a business license.
I think there is some inherent value to experience, and so the affiliate program is for someone who has, absolutely no experience and is a resident of the state of Tennessee. Under this, anyone with a license in a licensing state would reciprocity agreement, and additionally, they would have to still have proof that they completed the 16-hour core education in Tennessee auction laws, so that they're not out there selling motor vehicles without the appropriate licensing, and they know that they can't do that. They know what they can and cannot do, and that is an incredible ease over the current scenario. The case that I was referring to was, in fact, this auctioneer did have to go all the way through an 80-hour auction program, had to go through bid calling instruction, had to go through taking the test, and go through that apprenticeship period. That happens. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens pretty consistently, and making it easier for those people to prove to the state of Tennessee that they have the knowledge and the experience, all of those requirements that are established under that affiliate thing in a relatively easy way, where they don't have to travel from Minnesota or Missouri or Montana to the state of Tennessee to take education.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Meet those requirements, and can do that. I mean, anyone can take 16 hours of online education in 16 hours. So you're talking a matter of days, and our system in the state of issuing licenses has gotten really efficient. So you're talking a matter of 2.5 weeks, and it's a short time, and I think it's a very reasonable option.
Is the state he came, is it a non, is it,
It's a non-licensing state.
so it couldn't reciprocate?
He couldn't reciprocate, but what we have in this provision is without a reciprocal license, proof of experience and the 16-hour core education class would be sufficient.
That's the point I'm making. If we're going to offer that privilege to a citizen of Minnesota, why would we not say that someone from Tennessee could come up and say, hey, I've got all the experience necessary to run my own business? Let me make that argument. And that's what I don't understand is why would we do that
Get the
for
experience,
outside?
Will. Where did they get the experience? We currently have license law in place, so if they got the experience illegally.
No, because
then-
if you look at the provision there under the business license, what we're talking about establishing is a non-licensed employee working in an auction firm where they're going to be around the business and in the business, supervised, but around and in the business, for everything they do. And so the means would exist for them to gain experience lawfully.
Maybe. Just because they're in the room doesn't necessarily mean that they are acting as an auctioneer. In Minnesota, this gentleman was acting as an auctioneer, and all of the various tenets that go with that. Just because someone works for an auctioneer and may have done it for a long time and may be very bright is not proof that they have acted as an auctioneer.
Nor studied the law.
Nor studied the law or any of the other things.
Right.
And so while in theory I get your hypothetical, a guy who works for, say, you for 10 years is probably or maybe just as adequately trained as somebody who's been doing auctions in Minnesota. The reality of it is he hasn't been doing auctions. He's been working for someone who's been doing auctions.
They're a resident of the state. It only takes them 6 months to get there anyway, under this provision.
Right,
But let's be real about that, because that has a real impact. If you go to talk to a client and you tell the client, it's going to take me 6 months before I'll actually be able to legally sign a contract with you, you're done. You can't sign that business, and so you're keeping someone from being able to do the business.
What guy's going to go out and say, I'm in the auction business without having any kind of a license? You're talking about starting from ground zero. It's apples and oranges.
It's not, because this is how we're going to be treated as Tennessee auctioneers and every other state that surrounds us too. And so it's not that I'm not self-interested. I'd love to be able to go and do sales that if I had someone who wanted to hire me out of state, and I'd love for them to be able to compete in Tennessee fairly as well. The way the business works cross borders is through a regime of joint ventures, and it's protected by making it very difficult to actually get legally set up to do a sale without having a joint venture partner for the purposes of compliance. That's the way the business works across state lines. In Tennessee, we are at the crux of it because we have more states that surround us than any other. And this is where we're protecting ourselves. And I just want us to hey, if that's what we're recommending, at least we know that's what we're doing. But if you look at it, the incident of someone coming from out of state being able to claim experience and then denying that to a Tennessee citizen, that doesn't make any sense.
But just so we're clear, they're not just claiming experience. They're going to have to demonstrate experience. And we haven't written out what that demonstration is.
We'll give the same opportunity to the citizen of the state rather than making an out-of-state resident. There's just, what's the difference?
I don't follow that logic.
I follow the logic. What he's saying is, and just to see if I can restate it to where it can be understood by everyone, he's saying if somebody works for him for 10 years, then in his mind, that person may be just as qualified as somebody who claims that they used to work in Minnesota doing the auction business, or right up until the time, and they want to come down here and do it and perform an auction. If he's from Minnesota, his time to become eligible to have the auction here in Tennessee is greatly reduced simply because he doesn't live in Tennessee. Whereas if his employee, who theoretically has the same amount of experience, and that's where he and I would differ, because I would say the guy in Minnesota has actually done auctions and is an auctioneer, his employee has just simply worked for an auctioneer. But Will's saying he has the same amount of experience. I would suggest that he doesn't, because he has not necessarily signed contracts, because according to the way we've got it set up, he's not going to be able to sign a contract. You would have to always be doing that because he's your employee.
I just don't think we would know. I mean,
Well, at
how's the
some
state
point, we're
gonna
going to have to
expend-
take some of this on the faith of the process. And
But to deny someone the chance simply because they happen to live in the state doesn't make any sense.
well, I would rather err on the side of attempting to say that this person says what he is and this person says what he is, and those are not equal. We're going to let this guy, in an effort to promote business in the state like that. As Jeff just pointed out, your employee can be that auctioneer in less than 6 months.
The point I'm trying to make is if we do this, that's how they're going to do to us. And because they're going to look and see how are their out-of-state auctioneers treated when they come to try to do business in the state of Tennessee. And we're going to receive the exact same treatment, which is going to keep us from being able to go in and comply rapidly and pursue business outside of the state. It's just a
You live in
fact.
the state of Tennessee and you go try to get a Kentucky license, you don't have a license anywhere. It's a different deal.
I know that, but what I'm saying is Kentucky.
It's not the same, Will.
If I know it's not. If we make it easy for someone who is a resident of Kentucky to come and compete in the state,
We are.
then
All they got to do is have a Kentucky license.
the ability to obtain a Kentucky license when you're sitting in front of a client who's asking you to come up and take a look at their piece of
Bill,
property.
if you're living in Kentucky, you can't just come to Tennessee and say, I'm going to be an auctioneer.
Why not, Jeff? It's the United States
Because you
we live in too.
Because you have to have some experience somewhere.
That's what I'm saying is
If he's got a Kentucky license, he can get reciprocal with
if-
Tennessee.
but he can't do it. He can't do it in time to comply with the
Yes, he
seller's
can.
desire. No,
Yes, he can. We're not putting a 6-month limitation on that Kentucky auctioneer.
How long do you think it takes you to get a license now if you're coming from out of state?
Depends on the state.
You apply, under this, it would be reciprocal.
And how many of your clients are in a hurry when they hire you?
Well, you're comparing apples and oranges.
I'm just
You're
saying most
the
of them are,
Tennessee
'cause
auctioneer he can't just go up to Kentucky and get a license.
It's a big deal because they're so. Tennessee's a
You're
great auction
confusing the
state.
issue.
It's a great
You're
auction state.
confusing the issue,
There are a
Will.
lot of auctioneers here.
I call for the question.
And that's fine.
Question's been called for, so we'll come to a vote. First, we got to vote on the amendment to the motion for the apprenticeship, the affiliate, to be changed to no less than 6 months with a redefined logbook based on experience. So we got to vote on that amendment first. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Now the motion as amended, we're ready for a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? One opposition. All right. That takes us down to public automobile auction track.
I'd like to speak on that a minute. We
Yes, sir.
we have reviewed that track. And, I'm ready to go ahead.
Ending where, Mr. Lyle?
Ending,
With the word starting testing no?
testing, no, yeah.
Yeah, in everything above that you're fine
Yeah.
with. Okay.
CE.
Could you,
License.
It
Be
would be
licensed.
licensed as a big
Well, it
company.
says here you can only use a licensed bid.
What, okay, so I think I can address that question if I might.
Okay.
I am not an auctioneer, all right? So I would have the opportunity to obtain an auction business license as a non-licensed auctioneer. And that would involve getting the education and doing that. Okay, so, but that does not qualify me to call bids from the block. Okay, Mr. Gary is an auctioneer. He has the education, assuming that coming from a clean slate, he goes through, gets the basic core education, the 50 hours. He is a licensed bid caller and a business track auctioneer. Then he could call bids from the block. So there has to be some kind of a differentiation there, and that
You're a licensed bid caller and a licensed.
business
You got two
holder.
licenses?
No, you just, it's encompassed in your education.
Track
So-
would be both.
Yeah, so if you're B, you're also A.
It would, there has to be, and I agree,
I
there
mean, C,
does have to be,
excuse me,
there has to be some differentiation. Yeah, if you're a C, if you're a licensed motor, if you're the licensed public auto auctioneer, then you would be A, B, and C. Then you would have all three classes, so that if for the non-auctioneer business track owner, there has to be a differentiation. I think similar to the non-auctioneer firm now, that separates those that can actually engage in the calling of bids.
So maybe what I need, go ahead.
We can, I think where John and I are,
So now we're up, yeah, so everything above that, you're good.
where we need additional time to discuss is to better.
And Mr.
Would like more time.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, I have a question about, under that portion of it, selling vehicles and estate sales. I'd like for us to have a discussion about vehicles per estate to sell. And this is particularly relevant because it is quite feasible and very possible that as an auctioneer, I might be asked to sell an estate where the gentleman had a collection of cars. Some of them antique, some of them he just liked cars. And, pardon? Well, I know of one
Not
guy's,
often.
not often, but I know of one guy's business I'd sure love to get, and I don't know if I would be able to sell his cars.
And that may be something you guys need to think and come back with at us. You know, I don't think that happens frequently.
No, but it
But it
can
could
happen.
happen, and maybe there's an avenue to notify the motor vehicle department.
Everybody has open discourse. That's the reason I said everything above that, we're
Right.
fine if this task force wants.
Bob, if you would, speak into the mic there, I'm sorry.
We're fine, everything above that line for purposes of today, if you want to move forward. We do need additional discussion and be glad to discuss openly.
Are there any of those exemptions you are okay with?
Well, I think in the broader discussion, I think we probably would be, but
Devil's in the details.
One thing, one thing that does come up is you might get a farm, and I've had a couple where they had 50, 60 cars out scattered around the farm. Not that they're necessarily running cars, but it's still a lot of vehicles. Some people collect cars, but they're not very good ones. So that
There
may
is
fall in the
there is a farm exemption in the statute. I think RISA incorporates off situations like the farm exemption and things like that.
Then you got the guy with the collector cars that may have 20, 30, 40, 50 cars. And, you know, it don't come up often, but you don't want to turn that business away if generally it's,
Generally tied with an estate
Yes.
that you're liquidating everything else anyway.
Shouldn't that go through one of these?
well, I'm fine with that because we got that license, but some other auctioneers wouldn't be.
Well,
but-
So that I am.
I'm not fine with that.
There's other mechanisms that are there, but I hear you. I mean,
Yeah.
there's-
Yeah,
there is a few occasions that other auctioneers are going to need to
And they're-
sell several cars.
As Kenny said, there are times when you got them in fence rows with no tires and all that kind of thing. So maybe we'd be best to just postpone to this next meeting, give you guys some time to maybe think things through on the exemption.
On the exemption.
On the exemptions, yes. Mhm.
So, Mr. Weaver, I do have a question for you to make sure I'm got this straight in my head. Because we were posed at the school this question in the last week, if an estate has 7 vehicles, can the auctioneer contact the Motor Vehicle Commission and ask for an exception to that to sell the 7, or they just sell the 5 and then do something? What do they do with the other 2?
Under the existing rule, 096, state auctions, up to 5 motor vehicles owned and titled to the individual decedent may be placed for allow for a request to be made. Rule, but certainly they'd be free to appear before
But
the
maybe
commission to
that's-
ask for that.
Maybe y'all could consider, if it's titled to the estate, that we could sell it.
Well, what you want to think.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment? This is one aspect of the way that auctions are regulated in the state that is probably the single most egregious part of the auction law. A trusted advisor goes into a situation where they've been asked to come in and solve a problem to resolve an estate, and has to look to see which of the 5 vehicles out there in that guy's field that they can sell, and then tell them, sorry, I can't help you with the other 37 that have trees growing up through them, simply because the state says you can't. That is, whether you're selling online or at live auction or anywhere, it blows my mind that there's a law that says that an auctioneer can't go in there and solve that problem, unless they want to go in and get a public automobile auctions license, which in conversations with RESA, I think the cost of holding that would approach $100,000 a year. And so most auctioneers who are going to be that trusted vendor to go out there that don't happen to be like Mr. Phillips, that already have that license and are running an automobile auction business, that are going in there and trying to help solve the problem, can't do it, can't comply, and not only does it upset the auctioneer, it also upsets the executors, the heirs, and anybody else, simply because they can't contemplate, they don't understand why it is that you can't actually help them when they're asking you for help.
My knowledge, there's never been the first issue raised, whether 5 is a number you'll see appearing throughout the statute on the motor vehicle side. Tied back to a sales and use tax rule, when someone has to apply for sales. Five appears quite often. It's not truly arbitrary and capricious. There's kind of a bit specifics of the situation, but where there have been situations, I think certainly from the motor vehicle industry standpoint, we tried to be sensitive and found common sense ways to operate, and trying to make sure that the consuming public is protected from attacks, from undisclosed damage, from salvage vehicle, things of that nature. Backstory, almost all these exemptions you see, as I'm sure there is in your welcome the opportunity to go through those, but for purposes of today, for example, you asked me, Mr. Morris, about, is there anything you can live with? Sessions, under 55-17-102, there's an example law on banks, finance companies coming into possession of vehicles. Probably one that's, sure, I think that's one that could fly. Bona fide business liquidations, I think, well, let's talk about it. It's never.
Chairman, just to comment, Mr. Weaver, on what you're saying, maybe a solution which you all would need to craft, but maybe a solution is to have the 5 vehicles per estate as sort of a set number, with the right of the auctioneer or the auction firm or whatever we're going to say to petition in certain circumstances in a timely manner but the thing, and that's, we'll go to Will's point about it just have to be quick, a couple of weeks, but you could say when you go into that place and they have 12 vehicles, and you can say, well, if we only had 5, we could just do this right off the bat. We're going to have to wait 2 weeks because I have to fill out a form, explain what the circumstances is. The turnaround is about 2 weeks, and they either approve it or don't approve it.
I'm a great believer that we can
come up with
have
some
discourse and
Yeah.
find out something that does not impact.
Because as we said, it doesn't happen very often, but it'd be nice to have a mechanism to address it if it does. Yeah.
So are we good with voting on from public automobile auction track down to exemptions and stopping right there?
Yep.
Does that actually do anything at all?
Just have it where we'd have it on the table to begin with next time?
Oh, I mean, but is this language, is this substantially different than from what already is in place?
It is.
It is about the education. Okay, good.
If we've got 3 different variations of it coming up now, especially,
Just as a point of clarification, Mr. Weaver and Mr. Lyle going to review and bring suggestions for any exemptions to the next meeting. Is that correct?
We're going to review them all.
Absolutely. Cool.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay.
do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Now, as y'all eloquently called it, the elephant in the room, and it's 11:30. My opinion, and it's strictly my opinion, is we need to delay discussion on the online auction until next time as well, because we need to have public comment. And I know there's several people out there, and according to Dustin, at midnight, no, at 12 noon, rather, I don't know, pumpkins or something, I guess. So, anybody have any objection with rolling the online part till next month?
I make a motion, we move the online auction portion and the additional suggestions to our next meeting, which we've determined to be November 26th.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and everybody, that doesn't mean we'd have to drop the ball. Everybody kind of think about this and have some input where we'll be ready to hit the ground running maybe next time. Now, if I'm correct, public comments. There's anybody in the public that want to make any comments today? Taker?
Tony, bravest one.
Just want to, if you can, clarify a little bit about what you were talking about, the reciprocal license requirements, if there are any new requirements in your suggested recommendations, or if sort of the reciprocal, the ability to use reciprocal licenses today will be the same after these recommendations?
Jesse, you want to talk to that?
Basically, under reciprocity, what every state that has a license is reciprocal with Tennessee, and the general concept is that the licensing requirements are somewhat equivalent. That is, in reality, not necessarily the case, and I'll just pull the easy, the low-hanging fruit is Wisconsin. So Tennessee mandates basic auction education currently, mandates a 2-year apprenticeship, mandates additional 30 hours of what is called qualifying education, and 2 tests in order to get a license. Wisconsin and Tennessee are reciprocal, and Wisconsin requires no basic education. They require no apprenticeship period. They require no additional education. They do require a test. So when you actually get down to the bottom line of it, and you look at all of the states that have reciprocal agreements, there are, I believe, 13 to 16. The core is education, experience, and testing. Testing being the most consistent across the board. And so when we are looking at reciprocity, the minimum education for any state that has an education requirement, the minimum education requirement is 80 hours. And I think that all of the states are now at an 80-hour requirement. So 80 hours of education. So the education things that we have put forward with the tracks are the 16 hours, the 34 hours, and then 30 hours of bid calling would allow any auctioneer with those education requirements and the test that is equivalent to the test that we have in place now to apply for a reciprocal license to another state. And it would meet the minimum requirements for any of those states. For auctioneers holding licenses in those other states under reciprocity, the state of Tennessee has already said, we will accept that state's requirements as sufficient for licensure. Excuse me. So anyone who is currently licensed in one of those states is eligible for reciprocity in Tennessee, and that would not change.
And I think what he's asking, with the new law, nothing changes.
That would not change.
Nothing changes.
Thank you. I was just curious. To change the structure or recommend changes that change the names of the licenses from a firm license to a business license, or I'm not sure exactly how it'll shake out, but will existing license holders be grandfathered in?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so that will just apply to anybody coming into the system going forward?
It actually would just make it like Jeff and I have to have a firm and an auctioneer license. I think we get away with just having the auctioneer license.
Right.
We won't have to have the firm again. So it'll actually cut down on some of them. But everybody will be grandfathered in that's in.
To that point, I would like to, I would like to address the galleries that are currently licensed. I think there are somewhere around 100, a little more than maybe 100 gallery licenses that are not auctioneer owned. If we eliminate the gallery license track, the gallery license as it is, I would want to make sure that we have some kind of grandfathering procedure for that current business structure. And then as they fall off by attrition, that license would go away.
Yeah, that need to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments?
Can we make sure we make that amendment at the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, real fast. In the same way that people sent materials to my office to be posted online, I'd make the same offer if anyone wanted to make potentially available not just for this group but for the public as well, so that everyone could see in advance. And then also, if you had a more specific idea for an agenda for next time to send to me, I'll be happy to distribute whatever you'd like to send out. I did think, I apologize that I had to step out for so long, and I'm not sure if it was discussed, but something I will also prepare for our next meeting would be looking at the cost impact from some of the licensure changes that we're talking about, and the administrative impact on the program. So we'll do that.
All right.
That'll be our last meeting. Next one.
Everything done, it should be.
So we need to
Get everything.
get everything done then. Okay.
Have to have 4 for sure. Turn past.
I didn't hear the vote, so.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.